The ultimate objective cannot be about reaching a ceasefire. Let's be very, very clear about that. This occupation has to end. And I want to quote a very renowned Jewish professor, Haim Bresheth Zabner. He recently said, what we want, of course, is not a ceasefire. A ceasefire is nothing, because a ceasefire, it means that the fire will start again. No, we want the end of the Zionist project and the new Palestine, where Jews, Christians and Muslims can live like they did in Al-Andalus, like they lived in Palestine, like they lived in the Ottoman Empire. We are not looking for a two-state solution, and I think everyone has said that before.
So we're very pleased to have him here with us today. And first of all, once again, to tell us what his connection to Palestine is, and to tell us or give us some idea of how we can help to stop the genocide in Gaza.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, what we've witnessed in Gaza, I think, has been something that has totally changed the landscape of the world. I think I wrote recently, actually, on the anniversary of 7th October, I think it was more profound than 9/11. I think it was more profound than probably any other date, except maybe 2 dates before that. And one of those dates was in 1948, the Nakba, and another was 1924, when the fall of the Ottoman Khilafah. And they all linked to each other. So my parents are both from Palestine. My father is what we call a Nakba survivor. I think I saw a brother from Palestine who described his father in that way. He's 88 years old, and mashallah, he has had a long life in the Islamic da'wah, and he's lived through many different events. But he lived through the Nakba when he was just 12 years old. But it gave him an insight into the specific reality of what Zionist occupation looks like. So, as my esteemed guests have mentioned prior to me, the Nakba was a momentous time in the history of Palestine. People who lived in their lands, who were comfortable, were uprooted, literally uprooted from their lands and their homes, and forced to be refugees either internally within Palestine or many externally across the Middle East and beyond. So my father's town or village is called Qanir, small farming village near Haifa. They used to have farming lands, and in 1948 the Zionist terror groups approached these towns in the middle of the night trying to force them out. And my uncle Hassan was one of the young fighters who actually tried to defend that village, and my father remembers vividly the night when the Zionist terror gangs tried to invade their town. And they managed to repel them, but ultimately, with the excessive force that they had, they eventually left Qanir and then moved to Jenin. And they moved to Jenin for a very interesting reason. There was one very successful battle in 1948 that people do not talk about, and that is called the Battle of Jenin. And that was led by an Iraqi general, Omar Ali Bayraktar. He defeated the Haganah forces there so resoundingly that actually he asked for permission to take Haifa. He was told, you cannot move forward beyond Jenin. And then the women, the Arab women, the Palestinian women came up with a folk song. Shlono Saleh Zaki, Maku Amr, Maku Amr. What is it? What's wrong with you, Saleh Zaki? And he was the defense minister of Iraq at the time. Why do you not give permission for them to fight? Had he taken Haifa, Palestine would have been cut in half, and essentially the Zionist occupation that you see today would not have existed. That is the reality of 1948. That's when the treachery began. My mother was from a small town in the West Bank called Anabta. She passed away some years ago, Allah yarhamha. So she comes from a very interesting family. Her great-grandmother is Turkish, Fatima Aga. She came from Turkey during the Ottoman times. My grandmother herself lived to well over 100, maybe 106 to beyond that, possibly. And just passed away some years ago. She lived through the Ottoman period, British rule, and then the occupation of Palestine. That's my history, and I guess I could talk about that a lot. But I've been asked a very important question, and that question is, what can we do to try and solve the problem, stop the genocide? And I think to understand how we can stop the genocide, we need to really understand what the cause of the genocide is. Because too many people focus on the Zionists. And I say that, why? Because we know the character of the Zionists. They're occupiers, they are usurpers, They murder, it's like a bloodbath in Gaza. The way that they bomb the schools, the hospitals, homes. What we've just witnessed in this last year is a bloodbath, and what we've witnessed for 76 years. If anyone watched the documentary Tantura, or at least clips of it, from their own mouths, they proud to talk about the atrocities they committed in Palestinian villages and towns. But the reality is, what we're witnessing is not an aberration of history. People talk about Netanyahu, Smotrich and Ben Gvir as if they're the true hawks. They're the barbarians. But let me tell you, Begin, Perez and Shamir, they were all former prime ministers of the Zionist entity. And all of them were leaders in terrorist gangs called the Haganah, the Ergun, and other such outfits. And some people even tell you, Ehud Olmert, he's a peaceful man, he wants peace. And he's been quoted so many times, Ehud Olmert recently, he wants to stop the war. Was the one responsible for the killing of 1,600 civilians in Gaza in 2014. He was the one who came up with the policy during his tenure that they wanted to reduce the amount of calories entering into Gaza. Not to starve them, they said, but to make life hard. The ultimate objective cannot be a ceasefire. Let's be very, very about that. We don't want the fire to return again. 1948, 1967, 1968, 1973, we can keep going years after years of oppression. In 2000 itself, more children were killed in the West Bank than in any year previously, I think in the last 20 years before that. And that was 2023. This occupation has to end. And I want to quote a very renowned Jewish professor, Haim Bresheth Zabner. He recently said, what we want, of course, is not a ceasefire. A ceasefire is nothing, because a ceasefire, it means that the fire will start again. No, we want the end of the Zionist project and the new Palestine, where Jews, Christians and Muslims can live like they did in Al-Andalus, like they lived in Palestine, like they lived in the Ottoman Empire. We are not looking for a two-state solution, and I think everyone has said that before. However, unlike my esteemed colleagues, I do not believe that will come with peace purely. The reality is Muslims are not after blood. The Prophet ﷺ, when he entered Mecca, despite all the oppression they committed, did not go to bring about the people. He came with a force to overwhelm those who caused the oppression. At the moment, no one is defending the people of Gaza. And they're watching them being slaughtered day after day. Images and videos that are horrific being streamed to our phones on a daily basis. The reality of the two-state solution, just to comment on it. When the Palestinians were offered the kind of two-state solution back then, or the partition plan as they call it in 1947, 2/3 of the land was going to be given to the 1/3 Jewish population, and 1/3 of the land was going to be given to the 2/3 Palestinian population. Does that make any sense? The two-state solution will be even less than 20% of the land. And if anyone has traveled through the West Bank, they'll tell you that it's not even a land, because there are settlements dotted on every mountain. There's one settlement called Ariel, which has a university in it. They're not small settlements, and they're protected with soldiers. So there is no two-state solution. And to be honest, even the Zionists are not calling for a two-state solution. They're talking about taking Palestine and beyond Palestine as well. The solution for Palestine is also not an independent Palestinian state in the way that we imagine it. Palestine actually, unlike almost any other country in the Middle East, didn't go through colonialism and then their own fake independence. They went from one form of colonialism to an even more brutal form of settler colonialism. While Jordan, they live as apparently free people, and Egypt. But in reality, they're under the influence of their Western paymasters. And the truth and the proof in that is the fact that not one army will support the people of Gaza. And what are the people of Gaza calling for? Because I don't hear them saying, where are the Palestinians from abroad to save us? They keep saying, where are the Muslims? Forget that you have brothers and sisters here who are being slaughtered on a daily basis. That's what they're calling for. And the solution for Palestine is liberation. And we want it to be the most Definitely not a bloody kind of liberation where we kill children and women and bomb hospitals and schools and shelters and roads. That is not the characteristic of a Muslim. But we definitely want to end the oppression. I think this myth of the Zionist invincibility was completely put to one side. In the last year, by their own admission, 5,000 Zionist soldiers have been killed or wounded by essentially two non-state actors. Two non-state actors have bogged down one of the biggest militaries in the entire world with an air force, tanks, and you could imagine every weapon that's sent to them from the West. And yet they cannot overwhelm this small resistance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تَقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. And what is wrong with you? Do not fight in the cause of Allah and for the oppressed men, women and children who cry out, O Lord, deliver us from this land of oppressors and appoint for us a saviour, appoint for us a helper by your grace. Now there are two major obstacles to this liberation of Palestine. One is the lack of any sincere leadership in our lands, and the other is this concept of nationalism, this poison of nationalism. By the way, any person who lived in their land, in their own, that they owned, is protected. In Islam we have a concept of Ahl al-Dhimma, the people of the covenant, the people of the book. And from the time of Umar al-Khattab all the way till 1917 when Palestine fell, this concept was maintained and it was defended. So this is about returning the rights of those original indigenous people, be they Muslim, Christian or Jew. Everyone has a right. But Islam is the system which guarantees that right. Because the Crusades ruled Palestine and they created a bloodbath. The Zionists ruled Palestine and they've created a bloodbath. And as I think Rabbi Beck or someone mentioned, the most bloody time that the Jews had ever witnessed in this land is under Zionist occupation themselves. They had no threat to their lives in the centuries that went before. Now, in terms of nationalism, I was in Jordan a few months ago, and one concept that unfortunately you still hear is I have to protect my land, Jordan, Jordan first. This concept is poison because it says to you that this land, because someone put a line in the sand, is your responsibility, while this land, which is only a few meters away, is no longer your responsibility. That is a completely alien concept in Islam. Irbid is the same distance from Amman as Al-Quds is from Amman. Why is Irbid worthy of the defense of the Jordanian forces if it were to be attacked, but Al-Quds isn't? And by the way, Al-Quds and the Haram Sharif is actually under the custodianship of the Jordanians, but yet they don't even do anything to protect it. And the same goes for Turkey and Egypt and every other hypocritical regime who have done nothing to stop this and in fact had aided this genocide by trading, by normalizing. So, because I've only got a few minutes, I wanted to just talk about some practical actions that we can undertake. This isn't about just calling out this corruption. We need to be active in calling for the correct solution. Not just calling out the bloody nature of Zionism and settler occupation. We need to be talking about what a future looks like under Islam, where real peace can be established in these lands. And you know one thing that is when people limit Islam to a few actions, such as dua, charity and boycotting. And I heard this being mentioned in Jordan time after time. These are the three actions that we can do. And I saw a video from Gaza a few days ago, where the brother says, I don't want your dua, because you have a responsibility to me. Have you never heard of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy al Munkar, commanding the good and forbidding the evil? You just want to go for the weakest, easiest option without challenging yourself and giving time and effort and money and actually being brave. You may face consequences, but the people of Gaza have given their lives for this cause. So these are just some points that I want people to think about and try and implement. Number one, educate yourself about this. Do not settle for the minimum. Just as you understand the rules of Salah and Psalm, understand the rules of ruling and the rules of unity and how we view nationalism. بَلَّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Talk about me, convey from my message, even if you understand one ayah. This is a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not a clergy. Everyone has a responsibility. كنت خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You're the best nation race of mankind. You command the good, forbid the evil, and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we all have a responsibility according to our capabilities. And there's a beautiful dua that brother Dr. Yaqub Ahmed, the Ottoman historian, recently said, may Allah account those who could have done more but didn't. And may He forgive those who wanted to do more but couldn't. And that's how we should do it. Are we really doing as much as we could? Do not underestimate your impact. Number 3. I never really used to use social media before a year, but the scenes coming out of Gaza drove me into action. And I have reached at least 1 million people when I was looking at some statistics the other day. 1 million people, millions of impressions, tens of thousands of engagements, many meaningful discussions on and off the platform just by putting some effort in there. Be creative. Some people are amazing at video production or making reels. Think about what you can do. And if you're on the older side, don't count yourself out. Maybe you're 40, 50 and you're thinking, oh, I can't do anything. Have you forgotten that the message that came to Rasulullah came to him at 40? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was in his late 30s. Salman al-Farsi was of a certain age. They all worked for this deen. And don't settle for the minimum. In the same way that people push themselves in terms of their grades and their jobs and their businesses, do you really exert yourself to think about what you could do? Do you think about the people that you can meet, the discussions that you can have, the talks that you can give, the khutbahs that you can deliver? Do you really think about those things? If not, ask why. And actually the last and most important of these points is Gaza as your example. The people of Gaza sacrificed everything for Al-Quds. They could have stayed comfortably in their open-air prison. They're the ones who said we're going to sacrifice to bring this point back on the agenda, because the Saudis are going to normalize, the UAE is already normalized. They had to return this agenda back, this point back onto the agenda, has given them the resilience to continue. Clearly they're linked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Quran. The way they continue to show perseverance with all the killing and destruction is unbelievable. But how did they do that? It wasn't just magic. They built a strong relationship with their creator. They built a strong relationship with their kitab. And I just want to mention, this goes way beyond Palestine. If we limit this to Palestine, we're doing an injustice to the world. And in fact, I want to quote Professor Haim again. He points to this mission at hand. Because Sudan, Kashmir, Burma, the Uyghurs, in Congo, all those people are facing oppression. So what does he say? He says, so I think the stakes are very high. This is not just for Palestine that we're fighting, but we're fighting for a new Middle East, an end to Islamophobia as a policy and as an action of the West, the end of apartheid in Palestine, and for a new kind of convivencia, living together like we always did in the Middle East. That is the mission. Some real change. We're not here to create another nationalistic state that oppresses its people, that we see across the world now. And I want to finish with one motivating statement that General Mashhur Hadith al-Jazi stated, and this was a famous general who defeated the Zionists in the 1968 Battle of Karama in Jordan. And this man knew something that many of his peers didn't, that this ummah is a sleeping giant. And he says, the prospects in the near future are bad. The distant future are in the interest of this ummah, because this ummah will never be defeated. This ummah with an honoured past that is established on its history, its strategic location, and its religion, and with all her abundant resources and her great capability and potential, it will rise as the greatest ummah state in the region. The future is that this ummah will be the one state, the one force that will be difficult for Israel and whoever is behind her to harm her.